down, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
I am incredibly confused. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to start this video with something so drastic. But sometimes I just have to wonder what the actual the fandom is thinking. For those not in the loop, earlier in the year, Hasbro announces that Age of the Primes is changing the way Titan class figures work, making them smaller and more accessible to the masses. To be honest, this kind of makes sense. Titans have already been getting smaller and denser, which is honestly a much easier thing to handle, so consider me on board. This, to me, seemed like the next big step. And to capitalize on this, they announced a massive Optimus Prime to headline this new initiative. Pulled straight from Japanese G1 and its accompanying manga, this thing was massive and chunky, and as far as I was concerned, a really well-received piece. I mean, who didn't like this? The fandom seemed unanimous in its praise. Even if people weren't a fan of the design, they at least acknowledged the quality on show. But now, on the eve of its release, it's apparently the worst figure of the year and an insult to fans everywhere. It's gone to the point where everyone and their mother is complaining about this, that, or the other. Just take a look at that Toy Guy's comment section.
This looks like that Hasbro makes for kids that no offense to anybody who bought this, but this ain't it. They do this no more Titans, I will be pissed. I will say for what he is.
I like the overall design of this character, except for the outlook, as that looks much better on the original toy. This seems to be the only review I've seen where the reviewer is looking over the toy and ignoring all the
Gosh, I'm sorry. This thing
Some of y'all are delusional for defending this overpriced piece
Well,
of
this is
crap.
essentially Commander class, somewhat in line with Armada Prime. We don't need Titan class to become Commander class while retaining the Titan class
Looks
price
cheap.
point.
Not going to
No,
pick up.
this is not. This should have been a Commander and smaller.
That's terrible. We are not gods. Quote from G1 Jazz. Wow, that looks cheap, by the way.
How the hell is this thing for the better? They could have easily sold this thing at half the size and less than—
God bless you. Repent and believe the good news. The good news. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, died for the
$160? No, sir, no, thank you. This is an $80 toy.
Cringe.
This is a very big, hollow, lazy figure. Obama looks cool. All mode is trash to the 10th degree. For the price, no. Thanks. Try again.
It's so
Hasbro.
bland and hollow. Very boring and lackluster. Should have been smaller. I can't wait to pour milk in the chest compartment.
To be honest, initially I didn't feel any desire to review this. I knew how I felt about this figure, but I didn't really see a unique angle that wasn't going to be covered by anyone else. But then, when I saw its perception, something in me clicked. Everything changed. I suddenly felt the urge to give my 2 cents and actually get to the bottom of this nonsense. So, as such, greetings Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Age of the Primes, Titan Class, Star Optimus Prime, or if you're a longtime fan like myself, Star Convoy. Not trying to be a weeb here, I've just been using Star Convoy for over a decade now, and the new name doesn't roll off the tongue as well, so I'll stick with the old name. Also just realizing I've actually reviewed a lot of Optimus Primes recently, so maybe this'll be the last one we do for a while. But I really do mean a decade. When falling back into the franchise many years ago, this was one of the first big Japanese designs I came across and fell in love with. This and Super Megatron from the same manga series were 2 designs that I always wanted proper toys to be made from. And unlike Meg's getting his day in the sun with a truly delightful Selects release back in 2020, Prime would take a while before anything quite hit the spot. I did actually have a Kabaya one for him back in the day, but I stupidly never really took care of it, so it fell into disrepair, then got lost when I moved house. Takara Legends did make one that was supposed to go alongside Super Megatron, but it never quite hit the spot for me, and as its own thing, it sort of encroached on the same space as the original Power of the Primes molds, not quite changing enough in the retool process, so I just didn't feel the desire to go in. And as for the Mastermind Creations one, years later, the stylization wasn't really up my alley, and also I hear the joints were less than up to par. So when they announced this, I was really excited. Apparently I'm one of the few who was though, because this thing supposedly had a heap of figure damning issues. The first of which being... So I hope you don't mind, but I'm essentially going to intersperse these complaints throughout the video, whenever they're most appropriate. Firstly, we have the existence of the figure itself from a lore perspective. As discussed in previous videos, the big gimmick of Age of the Primes is basically, well, the Primes. Finally, after years of being incredibly stupid with the whole thing, they're actually doing them properly with love and care, most of the time. And yet, for whatever reason, they've given the place of the 13th Prime to Optimus Prime. This is apparently a cause for outrage, because it means we're not going to get a proper toy of the 13th Prime, while corporate takes a big fat shit over the established canon so they can just sell more Primes. Or do they? While I understand the frustration of being saddled with even more Optimus Primes after years of oversaturation, how often has the 13th not been Optimus? Most comics depict Optimus as the 13th, as does the Alliance continuity that birthed many of the ideas that are cemented today, and the few examples that don't really just use it as a carrier of the Matrix. Hell, before the 2010s, they didn't even commit to the idea of there being 13 in all continuities. Given the loose nature of canon in many series, and the precedent that Prime can be the 13th, is it really that illogical? Plus, take a step back, and does it even matter anyway? The lore and connective tissue between these lines purely exists to justify the toys they're making. They make lore for the toys, not toys for the lore, so it kinda shouldn't matter. Who's to say you can't substitute in Nova or Sentinel or whoever you feel like as your 13th? And you really think they're gonna pass up the opportunity of doing these figures later down the line, maybe in a few years' time? Oh look, literally as I was scripting this, what a surprise! These won't be the only primes. Easily. It's fairly easy money. To saddle all of this lore-based nonsense on a toy that's clearly just trying to be an update of Star Convoy seems a little bit silly to me. Doubly so considering this thing looks pretty damn good. Like in vehicle mode, it's basically a scaled up and filled in recreation of the original. And since the original was awesome, there's not a lot I can complain about. This is one mean truck mode. And that's not just in relation to his size. Any Titan can be big and bulky, but it takes skill to sell that bulk in mechanical detail, lest it look like an upscaled knockoff. And this is upscaled to a certain degree, significantly taller than the original, which I'll touch upon later as a point of contention some people have. For starters, the truck section is really low to the ground and gives quite the tactical appearance. At least as tactical as a massive red, blue, and silver truck can be. This is something I felt previous updates didn't quite get right, and having that vibe finally coming across in modern form feels almost vindicating. I love how they've managed to fill in the sides properly, instead of the giant gap the original had. This is how I always experienced it anyway with the Kabaya version, which did have the gap, but on such a tiny figure it was far less pronounced and far more forgivable. On a figure this big, they could have easily used the accuracy excuse, but they engineered this reasonably well. Just make sure the robot torso is locked in place solidly, otherwise the gap panels won't peg in properly. When I first got Prime, I made this mistake and couldn't for the life of me figure out what I was doing wrong. Hasn't been an issue since, of course. If I did have to criticize anything, I'm not really a fan of the shade they chose for the windows. I would have much preferred inserts of the clear plastic they used for the chests, though I get there's not a lot of room budget-wise on this thing with the way the ratchets work, and the G1 original didn't have them either. Still, while the shade is nice and shiny, I think it's a smidge too light and is sometimes hard to see under the massive red top section. Of course, I'm not too fussed, as Repro Labels is absolutely going to make an upgrade set for this, and I like this figure enough to apply them, but it is an issue for now and I need to point it out. It's the same with the grille at the front. It's sadly missing a good chunk of silver, though I suspect that's more so due to how this swivels instead. At least the grey chosen is an okay shade, and they've even painted continuity with the bumper. Said bumper is tiny, which really sells the illusion that this guy is massive. Also, awesomely painted lights, on top of black paint too, making it extra difficult. Love to see it. The yellow paint also coats the exposed kneecaps at the back immaculately, and you can more clearly see the metallic fleck given to it. It's a bit duller than you might expect, but I still think it works pretty well. And hey, again, it's a difficult shade to do, especially difficult on blue plastic too, god damn. I'm going to praise it whenever I can. This does highlight a pretty obvious design quirk, and one that a bunch of people take as a reason this should never have been made. Yes, much like the OG, while the truck section does remarkably well reshaping its shoulder mass, the trailer is very obviously just Optimus's legs. Apparently, this is cause for outrage, or something. Look, you're right. Yes, it is just a robot lying down, and yes, that is what the G1 figure was. But it's still remarkably clean for a robot that does this. Most of the panels line up incredibly well, with one key exception, and it blocks itself solidly with clear and concise color direction that was ripped wholesale from the G1 toy, sure. But still, that stuff works fantastically. And, forgive me if this is rude, but this appears to be a case of pot meet kettle. It may not be the same folks, the community isn't exactly one big hive mind or something, but so many Transformers do the exact same thing, but infinitely worse. And somehow, they get a pass for it? What, because one's Western G1 and one's Japanese G1? There's good ways and bad ways to do a robot lying down. And I think this is very much the former, but people's perception of it seems flipped. Genuinely, I think it's because they don't count Japanese G1 as G1. So any excuse to dunk on it is jumped on. Blech. I do agree the way in which the hip skirts transform is a bit wibbly though. For as simple as it is, basically being a monoskirt, it doesn't do nearly enough to hide itself on the top. I appreciate the effort given to make it flip out, but it still looks pretty messy, and it doesn't even click into the knees very well anyway. Had it been more than a monoskirt, maybe I could have let it slide due to the difficulty of engineering, but with the way it is, I kinda wish they could have added more. You can sort of cover it up with the cannon, but it doesn't particularly do much. Still, goes really well also the dual turrets on his shoulders. With some nice rotation and swiveling in each one, these really provide some lovely flair to the top of the truck. Something I never really experienced with the old Convoy version, as they were tiny, unpainted, and just sculpted in. I know it seems like I'm constantly shitting on the Convoy version, but I remember it quite fondly and would love to rebuy it someday. Moving back, despite adding a whole heap of articulation to the robot mode, they've managed to keep everything remarkably clean. It's all very simple, but remarkably effective. The leg detail does a great job of seeming like 80s sci-fi greebling, instead of just his legs chilling back there. Well, aside from the feet, but honestly, it's not too bad. And to be fair, those are G1 accurate. Not to give G1 accuracy a pass when it genuinely does with the figure, but in this case, I don't think it does. I do wish the gun fit properly into here, sorta like Armada Prime's trailer did it, only slightly less cohesive, but alas, the port here is bigger than 5mm. What the hell is with primes and proprietary ports lately? It's definitely a thing I've noticed on this channel. Now, of course, being just legs, the paintwork itself has to at least give the illusion of being a massive trailer section. Unfortunately, this brings us to the third major issue people have. Yeah, he's got Earthrise trailer stripes. Instead of coating the whole thing in a massive swath of gorgeous metallic paint, he's just gone for a flat coat with a tiny bit of blue on top. It's a big throwback to how Earthrise Optimus Prime was back in the day, in the worst of ways according to a lot of people, and I do get where they're coming from. But if I'm being honest, I don't think it's that bad. Earthrise was stuck with a really shitty trailer shade, and the pieces themselves were also incredibly cheap. I do genuinely think that with the leader budget, Hasbro should have painted these silver back in 2020, but for Star Convoy, no? This thing is massive! Where the hell are they gonna get that budget from? Plus, they did paint part of it silver where they were able to. They just obviously ran out of budget further up the figure, so kudos to them trying at least. So yes, I do understand the complaints wholeheartedly, but at the same time, it's honestly fine. Even budget aside, it looks far better than that old compromise thing. But hey, at least this makes more sense than the fourth major complaint. I don't get this one. I mean, not even the design of the original, the feel of the original has to be taken into account. It's all about big, massive motions, a quick, easy, satisfying transformation. If you can figure out a way to do that at the budget supplied without sacrificing engineering and solidity, sure, but I don't particularly see it. And it's hardly figure damning like I've seen a few folks point out. It's a far less common complaint compared to the others, especially the ones I'll discuss in robot mode, but it is something I feel I should bring up. Part of me is actually glad I get to rebut some of the issues people have, because I'll be honest, there's not a lot to discuss here. He's a massive Titan class truck former that does really well in simple ways that can be discussed far too concisely otherwise. The interesting stuff is mostly up the back, and there aren't many hidden details on this thing, save for, I suppose, the multitude of blast effect pegs on the trailer. They don't do much for me as I'm more into weapon usage, but they also take nothing away from the design itself, so I'm glad they put in the effort. And effortful is the word of the day here. They've gone the extra mile in a lot of subtle places. It's just difficult to talk about because it's not something you can go in depth on, so perhaps it's time to pivot to his accessories, of which he has quite a few. Technically, the turrets count as accessories as they come separately and can be removed. Not sure why you would though, he looks naked without them. The gun of course stores on top, and while it has some functionality I'll save for the robot mode, just to space things out, he can also make use of a bunch of blast effects. They're unfortunately just ripped wholesale from Jetfire and Omega Supreme, because for some reason Hasbro mostly doesn't want to make new ones. Though at least this time they actually integrate into the play experience more tightly and purposefully, as we'll see later. With that said though, this time they sorta did go the extra mile on top of reusing old pieces. Yeah, they actually made a new one just for this set, which is awesome! It's a little hyper-specific and doesn't have the versatility of a lot of them, but it's great that he comes with a new one for a change. It also allows you to dot up the rest of the truck with all of its extra ports. Not that it accomplishes that much. I still wish they'd start doing more of these whenever the budget allows, but it is great to see a little glimpse into that for once. For more involved pieces, he actually comes with two specialized vehicles. Prime instantly becomes popular with the lesbian crowd because like his G1 version, he comes with a nice chunky U-Haul. Apparently this is dubbed MT13 for Micromaster Trailer, then the 13 for the 13th Prime, but since it isn't labeled anywhere on the chassis, it's just sort of a moot point. Out of the whole set, this is probably the most light on mechanical detail, so it really has to lean into its crisp black deco and little paint it does have. I've always loved when designers take stickering detail and recontextualize it as sculpting, painted or no. It doesn't always work, sometimes missing the point entirely, but when it works, it really works, and this is a case where I think it does. I mean, sure, the red is a smidge dull, but it's still painted strongly enough, and you can't tell me the silver hexagon and Autobot tamper graphics rough combo isn't doing things. Of course, the deco doesn't go completely hard. For starters, they use the same window color, and paired against the black, it looks way duller. I don't have any qualms with them reusing window shades, it's a great way to save cash. I just think they didn't choose a particularly good shade. Though it doesn't really matter anyway, he's absolutely getting toy hacks later down the line, as I said. And even if he wasn't, it's not heinous. But speaking of saving cash and choosing shades I'm not a fan of, I do miss the back ramp being orange. The grey shade doesn't quite hit as right as it should. I get it, they probably don't have the budget for one piece of orange that wouldn't be used anywhere else. And painting the whole thing seems like a recipe for disaster. But it is a downgrade in my mind, and I do have to mention it. Interestingly though, there's a connection port at the back designed to put two of the tanker sections together. The front even detaches so that you can just have the trailer. Though like the original, you only get one for now. Maybe they'll give us another at some point in an accessory pack, though I wouldn't count on it. Though while I'm here, figure I should point out that the front wheels are fake and unpainted. I get why there's basically no space they could have crammed the thing in, but it is something to note, not that it's very consequential. Anyway, opening up the cavity at the back can potentially reveal the other little bot it comes with, Hot Rod. Still a bit confused on the timeline, as this is post-movie, but he's Hot Rod, not Rodimus Prime, but whatever. Hot Rod's been given a bit of an upgrade this time, graduating from Micromasterdom to Core Class, which in the death of the price point is kinda nice to see, though Micromasters also died painfully, so I guess it's much of a muchness. In vehicle mode, he's most like his G1 original, with a bit of roundness that makes me feel like Titan's Return vibe almost. At least he has a vibe compared to the dog shit we had to put up with a few years back. They actually commit to the downward curved slope this time, so he actually feels aerodynamic, doubly so with the fact everything holds together. Bare minimum, sure, but you know. I adore the paint on the front, with a 3-tiered punch of resplendent gold, crisp yellow flames, and piercing orange-yellow headlights. 3 colors and shapes that are difficult to do, and they do them all wonderfully right out the gate. Love to see it. The engine also makes a wonderful statement, a bit wider than you might be used to, but still quite lovely. Even the window works better than the other two members, despite using the same shade of blue. It is funny that the windows end up misaligned, consequence of the transformation, but hardly an issue. In fact, there's not really a damn thing I can fault here, save for some slight hollowness on the wings, likely for structural reasons. But even then, the metallic yellow goes so goddamn hard, it doesn't even matter. I guess it would be nice to see DNA fill these in, but if they never do, it's hardly an issue. I mean, you can't exactly call this a lacking vehicle mode. They even got the pipes down pat, which don't exactly have a good history. And if that wasn't good enough, the wheels are pinned, which allows you to roll this with ease. Again, there are a lot of pinned wheels Transformers appearing in videos lately, and I'm not complaining. Actually, all 3 vehicles in this set feature pinned wheels, though Prime himself doesn't really make use of them, as they're so bloody tiny compared to the rest of the body that the spinning action is cancelled out under the weight. I don't exactly see this as a zooming alt mode though, not necessarily something you'd see on, say, Velocitron. Then again, neither is a lorry or a Roswell spacecraft, so what the f do I know? What's lovely is, much like the original, you can actually babushka this thing and store everything inside each other. It's an awesome form of storage, and it even locks in solidly. And if that wasn't good enough, the doors actually open up within each other to allow Hot Rod to drive out. I've seen on a few copies this doesn't work because the combination peg is unfortunately too long, but this seems to be a QC issue that doesn't affect most copies. And even if you're stuck with a bung one, it's an easy fix with some sandpaper. Though, unfortunately, this brings up another major complaint I've seen folks plastering all over the internet. Yes, the G1 toy featured a spring-loaded launch mechanism in this truck. It made getting Hot Rod out a really fun feature, and sadly it's been axed here. But at the same time, given the ratchets and the sheer size of this thing that you'll see later on, I just don't see how that's really something they could have done. Plus, where would you really fit it anyway, now that the knee's got a massive ratchet in it? Really, I'm just glad we got this in the first place, and that they managed to store everything in here. It's a great piece of functionality that adds a lot to the mode, and although the spring is missing, I think it's nice enough that they kept this feature at all. You can even store most of the accessories in the other leg if you want, minus the massive f***off cannon, of course. This does include the extra turrets on top in case you're taking Prime from place to place and getting annoyed with them falling apart in your bag. Scripting for Titans is weird. I genuinely thought I'd lost Hot Rod when I took this thing to work, but it turns out it was just in another backpack pocket. Whoops. And if that wasn't good enough, he even includes his base mode from the original toy. It's kinda not gonna lie, but it's basically what people are asking for, so I can't fault it in the slightest, though clearly some can. Yeah, I'm a little conflicted on this one. Not disagreeing on it. God, no. No, on how I disagree with it. On one hand, it's really not taking budget away from everything. It's exactly like the G1 version, and consequently it is undercooked and completely daft. Big swaths of open space with a very obvious Optimus Prime in the middle. Parts strung about with no care. Very little connection to the platforms on the right, so it comes off incredibly easily. The rotating turret is actually a damn good feature, but the integration with the other modes is very piss poor. And as a result, it ends up feeling, again, undercooked. It's accurate, but God, is it stupid. It's exactly what people want, but f me dead, is it silly. Do you really think this is wasting the budget for the rest of it? Where is the budget in this thing? But that's one side. On the other, isn't this exactly what y'all were asking for? The last time they streamlined a base mode to put more into the other modes, there were so many complaints, I remember. I was there. And now that they actually listened to that criticism and gave attention to getting the rubbish just right, suddenly you don't want it? Look, I'll be honest, I don't really vibe with this mode and probably won't ever use it again after this review. But even so, I appreciate the effort put in here. There's little flourishes like the tabs on the skirts and the reshaping of small bits that they didn't have to do. And yet they also don't push it too far so it causes problems elsewhere. I'll be frank, I genuinely think the Armada base mode is a much better attempt, streamlining the thing and seeming more purposeful, much as that will piss people off. But I recognize that they wanted to do this design justice, and justice to this design they did. For all the issues I take, there are tons of little flourishes, like the fact that apparently the Micromaster trailer is supposed to evoke the old Optimus Prime toy in this mode, by their own words, though I'm not seeing it personally. But hey, they went through the extra effort to reshape the turrets. They knew they couldn't spring-load it, so they added extra functionality in its place. They even included cross-compatibility with Earthrise ramps, which I know was a complaint with Armada Prime's base mode. They've listened, and that has to be said. At the end of the day, it wasn't going to affect either of the other two modes regardless. So would you rather they included it or skipped it? There's always going to be someone who's relieved it got included. And if it gives more functionality, regardless of whether you engage with it or not, why wouldn't you include it? Looking at you, missing tank mode from SS86 Perceptor. Jackass. Prime's quote-unquote value in this mode is deceptive. If you just examine the truck and nothing else, he seems pretty plain and simple. And honestly, that's what I thought going in. But then you start to engage in the storage, accessories, and everything else, and you realize they put a bunch of flourishes they really didn't have to. And, well, 4,000 or so words later, I've weirdly come around to this more than I initially had. I already liked this truck mode before commencing this script, but I'ma be real, I kinda love it now. That's actually the mark of a brilliant toy, where the more you engage with it, the more you start to love it. It also makes sense with everyone complaining because they haven't engaged with it, often watching from afar. So what else is there to say, except kudos, Hasbro. Kudos. Given that this is a Titan and they can't really work with large piece counts, everything really has to be in large, chunky movements. And I think that's one of the big reasons why this works so well at the new Titan price point. Because it is, by and large, a figure that just works with those kinds of conversion steps. Of course, before we forget, I think it's best we discuss Hot Rod first. He transforms basically identically to his Micromaster counterpart, with one difference. First thing you want to do is bring the torso down over the top and it clicks in place. Nice and solidly. See, core class wasn't that hard. Separate the arms. That will allow you to separate the legs from the back there, and like so. And then the one new step, which is bring down the heel spurs. I would have liked some actual feet to fold out from there, but that would have also made some hollowness. So I get why they didn't do it. And yeah, Hot Rod transforms great. They didn't have to add any extra hidden weapon mode to ruin everything. He just works like a nice, simple Micromaster Hot Rod, even though he's core class. But he still works great for the size he's given. Anywho, on to the main event. You want to open up these two panels on the sides here, bring this up and slot it into there, and then collapse these onto the back using their octagonal hinges. You take these sections and you separate them from the chest. The legs are very simple. You take these panels and you bring them to the back here. They will click into two separate places on the front and also on the back. The feet will fold up. You bend it ever so slightly so that the hip skirt can come up. The connection port here is a little bit soft. I'm not a big fan of it. In general, it's the one part of the figure I don't particularly like in both robot, vehicle, and transformation. Especially when everything else is big, solid, satisfying ratchets. Anywho, it folds in on itself like that, and you can bring those nice ratchets back. And then you grab the whole legs also holding the back so it stays in place, and you separate them. I really love that that back panel actually stays with the rest of the design and doesn't unpeg separately like the Kabaya and the original do. It does tend to fall out a little too easily during transformation, but that's just remedied, as I said, by holding the whole thing like that. Anywho, you clickety-clackety around the torso like that. Lovely ratcheted waist swivel. Separate the arms at the top and start bringing them down. The torso will now move all the way down. The head will unclick and move all the way up. These panels rotate down and rotate into the chest, allowing you to get that to click into place there. Nice and solidly. You can then bring these and actually click them into the sides here. Again, so clickety, I love it. You then bring these down like that. And then this is actually what makes the gap fillers in the vehicle mode, just these little panels that fold up. That is genuinely great. Anywho, you rotate the guns around to their correct position, ratchet the forearms around to their correct position, and then you basically just bring the fists out by opening up this cavity, sliding it down ever so slightly, rotating the fist around like so, and it clicks back into place, lining up, allowing you to close the cavity there. This is the one part of the transformation that's ever so slightly annoying, but it's not that bad, all things considered. And it leaves you with a pretty killer robot mode. Yes, this is basically the G1 transformation wholesale, but in this case, I think that is a genuine boon for the design. Way too often we have figures that need updating, but use the same transformations previously, and transformations that were great the first time around, but get ignored in favor of worse ones. It's not very often that what a figure needs and what it actually gets exactly lines up. And I think this is one of the few cases where that actually has happened. In both instances, both with Hot Rod and Optimus Prime, they've done exactly what they needed to do, and delivered on that original transformation with appropriate hardware. It's not often we get figures that are this well built in junction with a nice, simple transformation. So I think we do have to give the designers credit for it, at least in this instance. In robot mode, Prime is a much simpler affair in comparison to his vehicle. Although the design is a lot more complex, the actual functionality is plain and simple. It's an upscale, chunkification, and posemified version of the G1 toy, which in this case is a very nice change of pace. Not only because this design was always this cool, and it always benefited from that, and not only because the last version missed the mark pretty hard, make that last two versions, but also because this comes to us from a designer who's caused a bit of anguish on this channel in recent memory. Glad to see the guy do something much more well realized. The head sculpt is f***ing gorgeous with a perfect balance of angles and curves. The crest is perfectly sharp and christened by a wonderful silver adorned mohawk above. The swept back ears are a real treat, thin but mean as f***. Always loved me some backward swept ear spikes. Really pushes the anime. These do tend to fall off occasionally, not in standard play, but whenever you bump it onto something, but I suspect that's a safety thing. Otherwise, these two would be made from a rubberized material instead. They even brought back light piping for the eyes, which is always lovely to see. I know I've said this before, but I'll keep saying it until things change. I miss most figures having light piping and would love for it to come back. The torso is basically perfect. It's just the right shape, not widened or shortened to modernize it. It's the same old daft chest that is always had, and it looks beautiful as ever with its transparent blue and resplendent gold. Love that they went with the gold instead of the yellow. This is a feature more associated with the 2005 reissue of the figure, where not only were many parts chromed, but several stickers were replaced with tampergraphs too. In fact, with the silver thighs, this is more based on that reissue overall than the OG release. Something I haven't seen talked about that often, but something I actually kind of appreciate. It really works for the design, I reckon. Maybe it went undiscussed because it's Japanese G1 and most Western fans only tend to get their knickers in a twist over Western G1 inaccuracies. Kinda nice not to hear the whinging for a change. With that said though, there have been complaints with this section aplenty. Biggest of all being... Yes, on a good chunk of Star Convoys, there's actually an issue with the window. For some reason, it's occasionally not pushed in far enough, leaving a slight gap between the window and the frame. I actually had this issue, and I'm kind of frustrated I didn't film myself fixing it to demonstrate. People are outraged by this. How dare Hasbro not assemble this properly? Between this, Omega Prime and Solus Prime, QC is apparently in the gutter. Except, is it really? Firstly, Solus Prime isn't even that bad. Just be gentle with her. And secondly, how is this on the same level as Omega Prime in any way, shape, or form? If you don't fix it, you have a gap so minuscule I didn't even notice it at first. Worst comes to worst, the connection with the chest cavity is a bit tight. Big whoop. And if you do fix it, all it involves is unscrewing, realigning, and rescrewing. How that's on the same level as disassembling 5 billion pieces, sanding down some guidance rails, then remembering how it all goes back together is frankly beyond me. Not to mention the crowd who says this is unacceptable, but defends the collapsing knees on the MMC version? If you're not going to give some much needed lenience, at the very least have some consistency. Is this something to criticize? Kinda? It is something to note, but chances are it'll be fixed on future runs by the time this video drops, so later copies won't have this kerfuffle. And even if they do, it's fine. Sure, in principle this shouldn't happen, but it's far from as heinous as other examples I've covered in the past. If I did have any genuine gripes with the torso, I guess the excessive gunmetal around the midriff can get a bit much, despite not continuing to the sides, which is disappointing. But the front section is accurate, and the sides are likely a budget constraint, so not much I can complain about there. Plus, I appreciate where the gunmetal was actually reallocated allocated to, mainly the collarbone section. Given this is a much more visible place to put it, I think they made the right decision. And ultimately, it's a wonderful torso section with some beautiful pecs and abs. Great job, Shuhei! No complaints with the arms though, they're proportioned and sculpted perfectly. The shoulders have actually been slimmed down a bit, which I think really helps the design. They're able to fit into the chunky aesthetic way better. If anything, it makes the original look like they've been stretched on the y-axis. Yes, I know it's weird to describe the original like that, but that's the vibe I'm getting. The tampographs even lean into this, swapping out the giant plank of yellow for a subtler Autobot symbol and wings below it. I think this is a pretty good change, and at the moment, I somewhat prefer it. Though I am curious to see what Toy Hacks does and whether I'll bother with those stickers. At least they're aligned properly. Been running into a lot of cases where they haven't particularly bothered lately. Conversely, the forearms have been bulked up, really leaning into the anime aesthetic, more so than even his manga drawings. Would have liked some paint on show, but accuracy aside, at least the mechanical deets are nice and crisp. Combined with a sassy opening fist and some absolutely killer ratchet joints, they become a real joy to pose. In fact, overall, the posing is rather nice. While there aren't too many bells and whistles, sadly lacking an ab crunch and any double joints, it's got enough to get some lovely and dynamic stances. Plus, the real fun comes in with the ratchets. A whopping 13 of them! Kinda on brand, one for every prime. I know some of the diamond bolts in the chat will puke at this discovery, but as someone who loves ratchets, this is a symphony of clicks that I haven't really felt since some of the Unicron trilogy outings. And if that wasn't awesome enough, most of them, if not all, feel like legitimate ratchets. It's not something I can discern without full disassembly, and I dare not because I love this thing and don't want to f with it. But from how they don't feel fake. These seem to be real springs, which I'm very appreciative of. The bottom half does rely on these ratchets though, because I think the legs could be a little better. They're not bad, but they definitely make way more sacrifices than the top half. My biggest gripe with the whole toy, though not a deal breaker, would be the sides. Because they've had to rejig how he transforms, now that he needs to articulate and not just have a giant trailer assembly on his back, there's now some awkward paneling on the side. Looks fine from dead on with how the legs are blocked out, but the more you rotate it, the worse it gets. The panel just abruptly stops and plummets into the back section below, with a third of it sliced off. I can't think of an easy solution to this, as painting the front of the shin would f with the proportions, but there had to be a better way to do this. You can remove them if it bothers you even more than it does me, but, well, parts forming, so nah. Again, there's not really a solution I can offer for this. I get why it is the way it is, but it's still an eyesore. That's not the only issue I have with the legs though, because for a personal gripe of mine, you can't store the accessories in the leg and robot mode. Whenever you try to rotate the ankle, they start falling out. I was actually worried I'd lost a few accessories when this first happened, but thankfully that wasn't the case. You can still store Hot Rod and Richard Hammond's spare Dodge tire transporter, but I'm a little disappointed about the other functionality. It was one of my favorite things with the vehicle mode, and I would have loved to have seen that return. Though, in fairness, it's rather difficult to access anyway, as the panel has to be moved to the side. They made it clear from the outset this wasn't an intentional feature, even if it's something I would have wanted. Can still kinda hold deluxes though, if they're small enough. Someone on social media was saying the Deluxe Prime could fit in perfectly snug, but no, that's just a coincidence. And thirdly, and this is actually a common issue a lot of the fandom has, yes, unfortunately due to transformation, the skirt is only single hinged. Thankfully, unlike a lot of examples, this one actually gets out of the way, but it does make the bottom half look pretty daft. This is probably the only community gripe I'm 100% behind. The rest range from understandable to completely daft, but this is definitely something I think they should have improved on. For a figure that costs $250, while the engineering makes sense, there had to be a better way to do it. Forget the side panels, this is where most of Shuhei's focus should have been. Though I can't really get too mad, because realistically, DNA Design will be making an upgrade kit, and chances are I will be buying it. Like, it's not that bad, and certainly not figure damning. Yeah, that I can't get behind, the fact that a hip skirt ruins the entire figure for many. Though if you think that's bad, well, I mean, did you not see the car carrying functionality? Would you remove all of that, the key component of the design, just to seal it all off? Plus, it doesn't particularly feel hollow, even having a lot of hollowness. It's no less or more weighty than it should be for the size. It feels proportional to how it would be if something like Tidal Wave was scaled down. But even that complaint makes more sense than... Jesse, what the f*** are you talking about? It's the original design. The torso completely changes shape from the windows. How the actual f*** Do you expect them to entirely rearrange the torso between modes and keep all the base functionality? What, do you want them to fundamentally change the design? That worked so well the last time. Wait, next you're gonna tell me they shouldn't have made this. Oh, wait, people are already saying that. God, that subset of Transformers fans can be stupid sometimes. Well, while y'all are arguing on whether you even love the franchise anymore, I'm gonna switch to something more positive with the accessories. Of course, there's his blaster, which is actually appropriately sized and built for once. Nice to not have a weapon that's weak as shit and actually included in the box itself. And something I didn't mention earlier, but he also comes with an included removable bullet. Apparently this is a homage to one piece of artwork where he was depicted using it this way, but I don't know, this is still pretty obscure and inconsequential. I'm not sure anyone would be hyped over this.
It costs $400,000 to fire this weapon for 12 seconds.
I'm probably just gonna leave it in there so it doesn't get lost. And speaking of things I didn't mention before, he also comes with this thing. The reason I didn't bring it up before is because it doesn't particularly have much functionality in vehicle mode, but in robot mode you can combine it with any of the included blast effects to make a sword. While this isn't a substitute for new, proper, cross-compatible blast effects, this is probably the most unique take on their use since Balventron did them in queer colors. It's pretty cool, though way undersized for the size of this thing. Really hoping DNA Design makes a bigger and more sword-like Fireblade in their eventual kits. Still, it's cool they included it, as it didn't come with the original toy, and as far as I can gather, there's nothing in fiction to back it up aside from a passing resemblance of the Matrix of leadership at the hilt. So I guess it's the Matrix blade, but not that Matrix blade. Other than that, I guess again the turrets count as accessories. They can be removed, but there aren't any other places on the body to reattach them. Aside from maybe the wazoo, and the shoulders kinda look bland without them, especially so now that they've been shortened. For something you can remove without causing much issue though, he has an orb of sorts in his chest. Canonically, this is apparently the Zodiac orb, and unlike the bullets, this probably has some significance. Also helps tie him to the Age of the Prime's artifact gimmick. So hooray for corporate synergy! You can use the sword hilt to raise it up even further, but given how loose this connection is, I don't think this was intentional. And you kinda need it down there all the way to seat Hot Rod in that space. This seems like a pretty cool feature, but there's a slight problem. You can't close the cavity with Hot Rod in there. I don't know, this feels like a pretty big feature missed out. Why would you pilot a giant robot with the chest open? Oh well, at least you can get some rather nice mechanical detail behind, even if it is par for the course. And the way the wheels become extra doors that cover the massive gaping hole is a very nice touch. And with that, I guess Hot Rod himself counts as the last accessory. He's actually a little frustrating because he's just in the middle ground between being good enough to be his own thing, but not quite there, so he has to remain a pack-in. The sculpt and paintwork is damn nice, with the gold returning in full force, a lovely head sculpt, and simple but effective panel lining. I especially love the three-tone chests. I don't even think this orange shows up anywhere else, not even on Movie Eggman's egg sack. The proportions are a bit daft, mostly because the shoulders are very thin compared to the line back of chest plates, but it's far from hateful. But where it really falls flat for me is the articulation. No head, and what I consider even worse, no thighs. Come on, this is a collector grade piece. It's not some cheapo Cyberworld thing. It's a potential replacement for Kingdom Rodimus. You can't even fix the thighs because they're pinned in. That's it. You're stuck with it. Even so though, while this is a pretty simple pack-in where I don't particularly have a lot to say, it is leagues better than the core class version we got previously. There's no icky mechanical detail, no random hollowness or bullshit kibble, and above all else, it has a consistent aesthetic. They had an idea and they stuck to it. There's definitely parts that could be improved, but it's a simple but effective idea that does it to a reasonable level. And I think that's sort of what the robot mode on the whole does. It's a much simpler beast than the vehicle mode, and that vehicle mode was already deceptively simple. There's no quirks, no hidden carrying functionality or extra base mode nonsense. What you see is what you get. Instead, it sets out to do one thing and it does it exceptionally well. B-Star Convoy. It's the kind of toy you just wouldn't see 10 years ago. They'd have to justify a million redecos and random gimmicks shoved in. They'd hollow out every nook and cranny while leaving the few parts meant to be hollow filled in. Beyond the marketing, it's basically the poster child for Age of the Primes. Not particularly doing anything crazy and wacky, but doing the figure how it always should have been done from the start. Of course, that means you have one more adjustment from the original toy. He's big, really big, significantly taller than the original. Star Convoy was always meant to be a massive Optimus Prime, and now in the same vein as Legacy Metroplex, has been beefed up to be pretty massive. Not so massive that you can't have any fun with him, which is how I feel about some of the older Titans, but still a chunky boy, and that has also led to some complaints. Oh, and that isn't even the craziest part. Yes, the fandom can't seem to decide whether he is too large or too minuscule. But either way, people aren't happy. On one hand, people are annoyed that this thing is a massive titan of a figure when the original wasn't that big. In their minds, a Commander release and a whole bunch of extra bits would have been much better allocations of resources. But of course, since the Commander slot was taken up by Silverbolt, he was presumably shunted off into Titan. Maybe this is true, maybe this isn't, but I think people are looking at this all wrong. I've always been an advocate for taking each figure as it comes. It might not necessarily be the figure someone has always wanted, but it is the one the designers were able to make. What is it trying to achieve, and how does that work in relation to the fundamental principles of Transformers design? Does this figure work at the size it's at? Honestly, I think so. In robot mode, the quality is deceptive, but there's enough in the detail, build quality, and especially experience with the ratchets that it works at the Titan's size. And in vehicle mode, he is able to do everything it's supposed to do, easily filling out play functionality. Maybe canonically it's a little big, but as a big bot, they've done this exceptionally well. Maybe a giant Optimus isn't for you, and that's fine. But I also can't see any specific reason to lock this out of this price bracket, especially now that it's been reduced. But what about the other side? What about those who think it's too small? This might seem a little daft, but there's a little more to it. Well, ignoring those folks who are comparing it to Siege Jetfire, which, no. Though I do understand the sadness that it doesn't scale with Select Super Megatron, but in fairness, not even Select Star Convoy did. And nobody owns Super Megatron anyway. It was peak COVID, they made like 3 units and called it a day. Height-wise, maybe there's a loose argument hanging together with a single strand of sewing string, but not in sheer chunkitude. But value-wise, while I don't agree, I can see where people are coming from. See, with the rising costs of everything, where people my age having basically made peace with the fact that we'll never own a house and probably die in debt, as well as the fact that there aren't particularly many Titans in that scale left, aside from a few outliers that could really justify the price tag, a change had to be made. Star Convoy doesn't cost the traditional 350 Aussie dollary dues. Instead, he costs 250, less if you get him on discount, which I did. I only paid 220, and full disclosure, that might be making me a little biased. When you consider the recommended full price, I do genuinely believe is worth every penny. Sometimes I'd say it's better to wait for a sale, but not this guy. If you see him at retail at what he's supposed to cost, he's absolutely worth it. But that's not why people are complaining. Hypothetically, he's supposed to be $100 dues cheaper, or whatever the equivalent is. In practice, often he's not. Many stores are taking this opportunity to instead pocket the extra savings. Countless reports from Europe and the UK, where instead is simply going for the original Titan price, have come through. Australia actually tried to at first, keeping the price the same, though eventually they reverted. Whether it was stores like Amazon purposefully trying to make extra profit, or Hasbro Australia pulling their same old shit, we'll never know. I wouldn't put it past either, especially after the whole Omega Prime debacle. Not even sure Aussie orderers even have theirs yet. And all of this is before you consider the United States. For some bizarre reason, among a ton of other nightmarish decisions, the president has at present placed obscene tariffs on everything not entirely produced stateside. This is a knock-on effect of raising the cost of many toys, putting the price of Star Convoy back up to that original $200 US, instead of $150. And instead of revolting, instead of reaching that Rubicon and saying no more, this has just become the new norm. But therein lies the crumbling of the argument itself, because it actually goes to show that the problems surrounding the figure don't apply to the figure itself. People are calling this the most overpriced Titan ever, when all of those circumstances have nothing to do with anything within the Transformers brand. They're not deliberately charging more, they're not deliberately taking their audience from Mr. Bones' Wild Ride. I'm not saying the arguments are invalid, but come on. You have to argue about the right things, look at the bigger picture. When Hasbro AU was price gouging Omega Prime, I didn't hold Mark Maher personally responsible for conceptualizing a toy that expensive. Criticize the people responsible, the store's price gouging, and the lawmakers forcing prices to go up. It's the same with the upcoming Grimlock. Evan literally couldn't explain how expensive it would be because the future is so uncertain. The world is shit, but whinging about Star Convoy in forums and replies isn't gonna change that, nor make the figure suddenly better. It's a brilliant Titan, and in theory, it should be great value for money. But in the way that many people present their arguments, they're really missing the forest for the trees. And with all those out of the way, is there really anything that is actually stuck? Well, aside from the monoskirts, not really. But that still leaves the question of where does he rank? How many stars does the star of it all deserve? Well, I think it all boils down to the type of figure he is. A few years ago, I came across what I consider one of Hasbro's best releases, Armada Optimus Prime. While I liked that figure, in fact I loved it from the outset, it was only after reviewing it and exhausting every feature it had did I come to truly appreciate it. I was smitten with it from day one, but it only became one of my favorite figures in my collection after spending that much time with it. For me, the mark of something truly inspiring is when it keeps on giving, even weeks after first getting it. When you're able to discover secrets within, extra functionality on top of an already brilliant base, that's the kind of figure I'm obsessed with. Star Convoy is no Armada Prime, there simply isn't as much functionality to pull that off. He is, however, cut from the same godly fabric. I liked him when I first got him, but now that I've really deep dived and engaged with some of the hidden subtleties and extra features, I truly love him. I wouldn't call him the greatest chug figure ever, nor the best figure to release this entire year, but he is a truly awe-inspiring release that only comes around once in a blue moon. Instead of hive-minding 12 inconsequential and or ill-informed complaints, what we should be doing is celebrating. It's not often we get a figure this good that reminds you of what Transformers is capable of. Star Convoy is that type of figure, and if you're able to engage with him at the price he should be, he's an absolute bliss to partake in. But as always, fandom public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on this new Titan style below. Is this pivot up your alley, or do you prefer the old style? Does the future look bright, or do you feel disappointed they went with something safe? Which has been your favorite of the 13 primes so far? Do you think this whole thing is stupid and want them to go back to the 84 to 86 cast again? For whoever that last person is putting those comments in the live stream, I know who you are. Start running. And as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time!